is such a beautiful day. It has been sunshiny all day and it's been so nice, and the spring vibe is here and I'm so excited. But I'm gonna do a February wrap up. I already did my March TBR, but these are all the books that I read in February, and I read 17 books. So last month I did 18, pretty good. This is not bad, this is a pretty good wrap up. So the first book that I did was The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, and that's by Mark Haddon. Mark Haddon is actually a special ed teacher. So this book was from the standpoint of a boy who was going through a huge life change. His parents were divorcing, things were happening in his life, but it has debilitating autism. And so the book was really unique in the way that it lets you into the mind of someone who might have and cope and deal with that situation. And so I felt like it was a good compassion read to just get inside the mind of somebody else and just to really know, this might not make sense to me how they would deal with these problems or situations, but it does to them. And it just kind of gives you a better understanding about how someone who deals with that might, live their life. So I felt it was really great, and it was a 3.5 star read for me. The next book that I read was Night by Elie Wiesel, and it is just a heartbreaking book, but so important because of the history behind it and the heart behind this man who survived the Holocaust in one of the worst concentration camps, which was Auschwitz, with his father. And just the story is heartbreaking, but it's so redemptive in the way that he overcame so much trauma to tell this story so that the world could know what the Jewish community really went through. And so it was really heart-wrenching, but I gave it a 5 star because it's so important. The next book that I read was Dawn of Hearts. This was an advanced reader copy by Narina Roman. Beautiful cover on this book. Horrible execution. I felt like it was a young adult story. It was fantastical. It had basically elements of fated lovers. So it was like basically this community existed to where it was people and then fae, and then the fae drove the people underground and the fae reigned above ground. And they had a community and a government underground that was ran by a leader. And then above ground there was a kingdom of light and a kingdom of darkness that were reigned by 2 brothers. One was, evil and one was good. And so basically, the girl in the story, the heroine, gets thrown up on a fae territory and she's not expected to live, but she's rescued by the king of the kingdom of light. And there is a sweet romance that happens. Supposedly they are fated lovers, but there's so many things that happen in between that give you a better understanding of the truth of the subplot that's going on, because you think one thing's happening but something else is happening, and there's betrayal in the book. It was great, but there was not enough world building and the characters were not deep enough or had a lot of dimension, so it was a very two-dimensional story, I would say. I gave it a 3 star. The next book is by Jenny Allen, and if you don't know who that is, she wrote Find Your People. She is such a great Christian author. The book is Untangle Your Emotions, Naming What You Feel and Knowing What to Do About It. This book hit me in a really good season for it because I was struggling with a lot of emotions related to grief, and so it really helped me break down practical steps to deal with that, and I gave it a 5 star for that reason. She peppers in so many scriptures and inspirational quotes and just encouraging testimonial stories to just get you through those difficult times in life, and it was such a great read for me. I loved it. Also an advanced reader copy. The next one is by Lynn Painter, Better Than the Movies, All the Sweet Vibes, 4.5 stars. I just adored this book. It was enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, high school romance, first love, coming of age, overcoming loss and grief. It was just everything you want it to be. And she is in love with movies, romance movies. And so in her mind, she has all these soundtracks from romantic movies going and playing at all times, and she assigns certain movie tropes to certain situations in her life, and she's just very much like a movie nerd, and it's so cute. And she ends up falling for the most unexpected person, where she is actually in a fake dating situation to try to use this one person to get another person, and she ends up finding that all she ever needed might just be in unexpected places. So it was just such a great book. The next book I read was by Ashley Poston. I had such great hopes for this book. Everybody loves this book, The 7-Year Slip, and I'm here to tell you it is depressing, but it was sweet, but it's just very heavy. It was 3.5 stars for me. I went in thinking it was gonna be rom-commy and lighthearted, and it just hit very deep, very fast. Magical apartment that sends you back in time 7 years and then propels you forward when you leave it. And so basically it was like these two people wanted to make it work, but they're always on the wrong side of time. And they had to kind of find their way back to each other. It's very much the Lake House movie with Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, that kind of vibe. But what I didn't love about it was I didn't love the main male character, and I didn't love the heavy atmosphere of the book. It just wasn't what I expected. So it might be for somebody, but it just might have been better had they had a little bit more breathe easy moments in the book, breaks from all the heavy content and like themes. The next book I read, I've talked so much about in all of my videos, The Women by Kristen Hanna, 5-star read. I absolutely loved this. And if I didn't say it, I think I did. The 7-Year Slip was a 3.5 star for me. I loved The Women. I lived in Hanoi, Vietnam for 6.5 years of my life, so I loved getting an alternate view of the Vietnam War from a perspective of somebody who was in it as a woman. And the women were not given any recognition or celebration or acknowledgement for all the things they sacrificed in the war. And it was very Mulan vibes, like this daughter is trying to bring honor to her family and heroism upon her house because her brother ends up dying in the war and she wants to go and fight in his place, kind of. And her father just drops the ball in every possible way and doesn't acknowledge her effort. And when she comes home as kind of a beat up, emotionally wounded veteran from the war, she gets no help and no support, and her life falls apart before it gets good, but there's a redemptive story at the end. And I think it's a very important story to tell because a lot of people lived this out in real life. This is historical fiction, but it's based off of true events and true people. She interviewed, I think it was like over 50 people, maybe even more, I don't know, I could be wrong, for this process of real people who went through the war. 5-star read. You can expect nothing less from Kristen Hanna. I love her, she's great. The next book I read was I Promise I Won't Always Hurt This Way, 18 Assurances on Grief. Enough said, this book, 5-star for me. It hit me in the feels because that's the season I'm in right now, overcoming loss. My dad passed away in October of 2023, and I've been on this journey of trying to overcome my grief. And if you're struggling with that or it's something you've been through, please comment below. I would love to reach out to you. If you need someone to talk to, please let me know. I would love to talk with you. But this book is by Claire McIntosh. She's actually a very popular author, but this book specifically hones in on her story where she lost a child, twins, and one of the twins made it and one of the twins did not survive. And it's a very heavy story, but it's her life and it gives you all the assurances and wisdom that she can offer. The next book I read, Sarah Adams is like my modern day Jane Austen. All of her books are so sweet and charming and have so much colorful language, and they're kind of like if you could imagine Jane Austen writing a book today, how she would use pop culture or verbiage of today to tell a love story. It's clean, it's sweet, the verbiage around the romance scenes are closed door, they're appropriate, and they're just gorgeous. The way she describes love. And this book is about like someone who falls very hard and kind of for the first time. And it's a sister of basically it's the sister of the main character in the first book, which is When in Rome. And I don't want to give too much away, but the sister falls in love with the bodyguard of her sister-in-law, her new sister-in-law. And she is using him, his name is Will, to teach her how to date better because she's such a bad dater. She's quirky, she's socially awkward, she says things out of turn, her jokes don't land. Like she's pretty much every girl trying to find love and hitting every obstacle. And so it's such a sweet story to see how their relationship wraps up and what happens and how they hit bumps along the way and how they figure out who they are and how they could be together. And it's such a sweet story. 5 stars all the way, all day long. The next book I read was a poem a book of poetry, and it was by S.K. Williams, Before You Know It. I 3-starred it, nothing fantastical, nothing great, just a book of poetry about going through difficult seasons in your 20s. Boo. The next book I read was Defy the Night by Bridget Kimmerer, or
what?
Kimmerer. I don't even know how to pronounce her last name. Something. Kimmerer. It was great. It is young adult, it's fantasy. Basically, it's dystopian, and there is a pandemic of fevers breaking out all over, and there's only one cure, which is the moonflower. There's a monarchy, and it's basically keeping this flower and only giving it to the rich and the wealthy and not giving enough to the people in need. And so there are two thieves that come together, and they're like, we're gonna make this right. We're gonna take the moonflower and give it to people who need it. It's very much like a Robin Hood type story, but there is a famous person and a regular person trope, love trope, and royalty trope, to where it's like a royal person falling in love with a regular person. There's also like concealment of identity and betrayal and death and vulgar murder and just crazy stuff for young adult books, and this was a great one. I 4-starred it, super fabulous. The Rom-Commers by Catherine Center was my next book, 5-star read. All of the quirky romantic feels. It was basically like a, I don't know, When Harry Met Sally type of sweet romance rom-com. It is a famous person, once again, falling in love with a regular person trope. There is basically they're in the same type of job to where they write for plays or shows, and she is an amazing writer and he's a writer for sci-fi stuff, and they are going to band together to write a rom-com, and he's horrible at it, and she comes alongside him and helps him in ways he could have never imagined. And their love story and their story of how they become friends first, it's kind of also enemies to lovers. It's a really sweet story, and the ending of this book was Oscar worthy. I think about it at least once a day. It was very fabulous. The next book I read was The Neighbor Wager by Crystal Caswell, and I just 2-starred it. I DNF'd it at 34%. It just was very shallow to me, the entire book, and I didn't like it. The Cheat Sheet by Sarah Adams, once again, she just can't do any wrong. 5-star. I love this book. It's my first big sports romance book. Two best friends grow up. One becomes an NFL star. One becomes a dance instructor. They have never admitted feelings for each other, but they end up in a fake dating relationship that reveals more than they could have ever imagined. Anxiety awareness in this book, sweet, tender, slow burn romance, and it's like whimsical. I loved this book. The next book, 5-star by the way, I think I said that already. My Oxford Year was the next book I read by Julia Whelan. I 4-starred this book. By the way, Julia Whelan is a phenomenal voice actress. For any audiobook that you could pick up with her, I 100% think you should get it. She wrote this book from such a beautiful stance. It's beautifully tragic, but it was devastating to me because it was my life, and I had just gone through somebody who'd been going through chemo and going through cancer and going through kind of like wasting away, and it was just really hard for me to read. But the love story, the poetry, the literature in this book, because they actually are getting a literary degree, and so the literature that is brought up and quoted in this book was just phenomenal, and I can't really say enough about it. I 4-starred it because it just devastated me so much, but it was a really wonderful read. The next book is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I loved this book. I 4-starred it. All of the Twilight feels. Basically, it is different government groups, werewolves, vampires, people, and the werewolves have had a very rocky relationship with the vampires in the past. And so the main person, like the main government leader, will send someone of high status to go and live with the enemy as collateral. And usually it's in a peaceful like arrangement of marriage. So it's like a peace treaty for an arranged marriage. And so this vampire woman who is of high status, she is like, I think the highest political leader in the vampire world's daughter goes to live with this new alpha were. They call him were, like weres, like werewolves. And she has to basically figure out her life in that situation that she doesn't want to be in. But there is a beautiful enemies to lovers story. There is such a sweet romance, found family, all of the feels, and it's so Twilighty, and it's kind of like if Bella had went with Jacob kind of stuff. So you have to check it out. Wonderful book. The next book and last book is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I one-starred it. I know there's a lot of hype around it, but I couldn't get beyond the controlling, gaslighting ex in the story that just kept popping up. Mental and emotional abuse is a big trigger for me, and so I just did not like that book for that reason. You may be okay, and that might not be a big deal for you, and you could read it and you'd be fine, but it just wasn't my favorite, so I did one-star it, and this is probably the first book I have one-starred that has been popular. So that's just me, but it doesn't have to be you. You might love it. This is actually the first in her book series. The second one would be Yours Truly, and everyone loved it. Don't give up on Abby Jimenez. I'm not going to give up on her. I'm going to read that book next. So that's my February wrap up. I hope you enjoyed it. If you loved these books, if you hated these books, if you thought they were great or bad or whatever you thought, put it below in the comments so I can reach out to you. If you are someone struggling with grief and you are on a journey and you need someone to talk to, please reach out, comment below, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.